อยู่แบบโฟลอนโอเคเดี๋ยวเข้าไปตัด1 2 3โอเคสวัสดีค่ะ so this is the CSP tutorial for specific contract and yeah this is shouldอาจารย์ชุติกา part which is about the hire of property. Okay, let's start it. So um the main context of an agreement concluded by Nati and Tida is that Nati agreed to let his land and house to Tida. Tida agreed to pay Nati to a form of installment at 20,000 baht per month in exchange for the right to use the property. According to the definition of hire of property contract, these agreements fall under the provided definition under Section 537 of the Civil and Commercial Code. In this case, Nati become the lender and Tida become the hire in this contract. Since land and house are immovable property, therefore it is a hire of immovable property contract. According to Section 538, the hire of immovable property must be in a written form registered by the competent authority. Otherwise, the contract becomes enforceable for only 3 years. In this case, the agreement was done in writing but remained unregistered. For general, hire of immovable property contract, after 3 years passes, the contract will not be enforceable anymore. However, in this case, it is to be noted that in addition to the rent of Tida agreed to pay, she also agreed to pay for renovation of the kitchen. The renovation cost is not an usual obligation of the hire in the hire property contract. It is rather a special compensation offered by the hire in order to be an incentive to the latter to reach the conclusion of the contract. When there is a special compensation involved, the agreement becomes more than a mere hire property contract. It becomes a special hire of property. This kind of agreement does not have a special rules of interpretation in the Thai Civil and Commercial Code, but it is a Supreme Court jurisprudence instead. One of the features is that the special hire property will not be subject to Section 538 of the Civil and Commercial Code that I have told you before. As a result, the agreement concluded by Nati and Hida will remain enforceable even if a 3-year period passes. With regard to right and obligation for the party, starting from Nati, the latter has to perform contractual obligation by letting Tida use the agreed land and house. Nati also has to deliver the property correctly, for example, the right place, time, quality, and quantity, and preserve and repair the hire property, for example, fix the defects occurring during the contract, and reimburse the hire for the reasonable expense for the property preservation. Considering Nati right, Nati has a contractual right to receive rent from Tida at 20,000 baht per month. In case Tida fails to pay, Section 560 allows Nati to terminate the contract, provided that Nati has given payment notice to Tida, and Tida still fails to pay since the payment is at a monthly interval. Nevertheless, it's not the main concern of the question, but we want to tell you, yeah. The provided fact stated that after 3 years of the conclusion of the agreement, Thani moved to live with Tida. Note that this does not raise the issue of sublet, since Thani does not have an obligation to pay Tida. Therefore, he is not a sub-hire. He is considered as Tida's subordinate. Later on, Thani invited his friend to celebrate a party and consequently caused annoyance and damage to the property in the contract. This triggered the legal right for Nati. Section 553 requires the hire to take care of the hire property as much as person of ordinary prudence would do to his own property. Here, the property was damaged, reflecting the higher lack of care in preservation of property. Therefore, the latter has the right to demand the hire to use and preserve the property correctly. Should Tida fail to do as requested, Nati can terminate the contract after that. Such right to terminate the contract is provided by Section 554, which allow the latter to terminate the contract after the hire fails to follow Section 552 and 553. Okay, in this case it's 553, and still fail to do so. After that, the latter can demand the termination of the contract. Furthermore, since the property was damaged, Nati can demand compensation from Tida, as well as Section 562. The provision imposes liability to the hire in case there are damage occurring to the latter property, whether done by the hire, the person living with the hire, or sub-hire. In addition, Tida cannot claim an exception from liability under paragraph 2 of the same provision since the property was not used properly. On the other hand, Tida has a contractual obligation to pay rent to Nati. Tida also has to use the property in accordance with the custom usage of the contract. In this case, even though Tani called his friend to party in the house, partying is arguably not breaching the normal usage of the land and house, since it is normal that people conduct party or celebrate like in the place that they live, for example, like birthday party. More importantly, Tida has a duty to preserve the property like how the person with ordinary prudence would do to his own property, as previously that I mentioned about section 553. However, Tida failed to do so due to the fact that there are damages to Nati property. This makes another duty arise for Tida. Tida is bound to make the compensation for damages under section 562, as previously I mentioned. If Nati decides to terminate the contract by virtue of sections 554, provided that the letter has already given notice, but the hire failed to comply. The hire still failed to comply. Tida will have to return the property to Nati.
So considering the agreement made by Tida, that Nati will have to compensate her by paying 100,000 baht in accordance to cost B of the contract with the renovation fees paid by Tida. The analysis is as provided below. Tida tries to invoke the contractual clause against Nati. According to the timeline, the written hire of immovable contract which is unregistered shall not be enforceable when a 3 years period passes. However, this contract was not normal hires of property. It is a special hire of property as analyzed above. Therefore, its enforceability remains intact even though 3 years has passed. This contract remains enforceable. Therefore, it is true that Tida can demand 100,000 baht from Nati in case Nati wishes to terminate the contract immediately without complying with section 554. It was in accordance with clause B of the contract. However, the agreement Tida made, Nati does not have the right to terminate the contract. It is not entirely correct. Because of annoyance and the damages done to the heirs of property by a person living with Tida, Nati can demand Tida to use the property properly. If Tida or Tani fails to comply, this is when Nati has the right to terminate the contract in accordance with section 554. Lastly, considering Tida's claim for the renovation cost upon the termination of contract, the general rules of obligation section 391 has stated that the consequence of termination of contract is restitution, which is the situation where the parties return to their previous condition. However, it is to be noted that the restitution in hires of property does not have retrospective effect, which means that the hire cannot claim the previous paid rent back from the latter. For renovation costs, since the contract was terminated before its agreed extinction, that the contract was not properly fulfilled. Therefore, the renovation costs paid by Tida should be returned to Tida as well by the virtue of section 391. In conclusion, as a letter, Nati has a general duty of the letter such as delivery or preservation and etc. The important right in this case for Nati would be the right to terminate the contract under section 554 in conjunction with section 553. However, Nati cannot terminate the contract immediately. Such a right can be exercised after Nati demands Tida to use the property properly and Tida fails to comply with it. Moreover, Nati can claim compensation from Tida from the damage incurred to land and house under section 562. For Tida who tries to invoke the contract terms to get 100,000 baht in case Nati decides to terminate the contract immediately without complying to section 554. Tida can do so because the contract is still enforceable after 3 years even though it was not registered. Since it is special hire of property, for the kitchen renovation cost, the restitution under section 391 will give Tida back the money she spent on renovation. As of the duty, initially Tida has a duty to take care of the property as a person of the ordinary prudence, thus under section 553. But Tani, Tida's subordinate, caused damage to the Tida land and house. Tida then bears the liability and has compensated Nati for such damage under Section 562. Lastly, upon termination of contract, Tida has to return the property to Nati.
Okay, this is all about the tutorial with this question, and this is the conclusion of all about this. If you don't understand something, you can read this. Okay, and thank you. Bye bye ค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ